The hospital room buzzed with activity. Machines hummed and beeped, filling the air with an urgent symphony of sound. I lay there, a whirl of pain and anticipation swirling in my mind. My husband John gripped my hand tightly, his words of encouragement barely breaking through the haze of my labor pains. "Sarah, you're doing great. Just breathe," John said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. In the corner, my mother-in-law Martha sat quietly, her face a mask of concern. But behind those furrowed brows, something darker seemed to flicker beneath the surface. "Can I get you anything, Martha?" John asked, his attention briefly shifting from me. "No, dear, I'm fine. Just worried about Sarah," she replied, her voice dripping with concern. But her eyes remained cold, detached. The contractions intensified, each wave stronger than the last. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the thought of holding my baby soon. "Almost there, Sarah. I can see the head," the doctor announced, snapping me back to the present. It was then that I noticed Martha. She had moved closer to the medical supplies, her movements slow, deliberate, almost too careful. She reached for something, her back to the rest of us. "Martha, what are you doing?" I gasped, momentarily forgetting the pain. "Oh, just looking for some water, dear," she said casually, her hands fidgeting with something unseen. But her tone was too light, too forced. Nurse Helen, sharp-eyed and vigilant, stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. This area is for staff only," she said firmly. Martha began to protest, but I was just. "No excuses. Please sit down." "Sarah needs a calm environment," Nurse Helen insisted, guiding Martha back to her seat. The tension in the room thickened for a moment. Everyone's eyes shifted briefly, but I caught a glimpse of Nurse Helen's expression. Her gaze lingered where Martha had been, a mix of suspicion and concern clouding her face. Minutes later, the cry of a newborn filled the room. Relief washed over me, exhaustion overtaking every muscle in my body. "Congratulations, Sarah and John. You have a beautiful baby boy," the doctor said, as John cut the cord. "The nurses cleaned our son." But I couldn't shake the sight of Nurse Helen discreetly watching Martha, her focus sharp and unwavering. Later, when the excitement had settled, and I was left alone with John and our son, I brought it up. "John, did you notice anything odd about your mom earlier?" I asked, my voice weak from exhaustion. "Odd? No. Why? She's just concerned about you. You know how she is," John replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired, but something felt off," I said, the image of Martha near the medical supplies replaying in my mind. John smiled gently and placed our son in my arms. "You've been through a lot today, Sarah. Let's focus on our little miracle." I held my baby close, but a feeling of unease nestled deep in my heart. I knew Martha's concern was a facade, yet I had no proof, only instincts that screamed something wasn't right. I resolved to stay vigilant, though the incident was brushed off as a misunderstanding. But it wasn't the first red flag. Days later, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, shadows danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil in my mind. That moment in the hospital wasn't isolated. There were other signs, like the time she accidentally gave me expired food and our baby spoiled milk. My heart raced as I considered the implications. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I never thought I'd need. "Hello, Dan. I need your help." Dan, a private investigator known for his discretion, listened as I recounted my fears. "So you suspect your mother-in-law has been intentionally trying to harm you?" Dan asked, his voice a mix of concern and professionalism. "Yes, and I need to know if I'm being paranoid or if something's really going on." Over the next few weeks, Dan dug into Martha's past. We met regularly, discussing his findings in quiet cafes over coffee. "I've spoken to a few people who knew Martha," Dan began one morning. "There's a pattern of manipulative behavior, but we need more concrete evidence." Determined, I took matters into my own hands and decided to speak to some of Martha's old acquaintances myself. My first stop was Linda, a former neighbor. The smell of freshly baked cookies filled the kitchen as she sat across from me, her expression uneasy. Martha was always a bit off, Linda admitted, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her teacup. She'd do petty things to get back at people she didn't like. "Like what?" I probed, my heart pounding. There was one time she spread a nasty rumor about another neighbor just because they had a disagreement. It almost destroyed the woman's reputation. Linda said, her voice tinged with fear. My next visit was with Betty, who had worked with Martha. She was sweet as pie to your face. But behind your back, a different story, Betty confided as we sat on a park bench watching autumn leaves fall. Did she ever do anything harmful? I asked, dreading the answer. Betty sighed. She sabotaged a coworker's project out of spite. Got the woman fired. Each story added another layer to the puzzle, revealing a woman capable of quiet cruelty. That evening, as John and I sat down for dinner, I couldn't keep silent any longer. John, we need to talk about your mother. What about her? He asked, looking up from his plate. I've been talking to people. There's a pattern of toxic behavior, and I'm worried about our safety, I said, my voice trembling. John frowned, setting down his fork. Sarah, are you sure you're not overreacting? Mom can be difficult, but she's not a monster, John replied, his tone laced with skepticism. I wish I were overreacting, I whispered, my voice heavy with frustration. But the things I've heard, they're serious, John. He sighed deeply, torn between disbelief and the growing unease he couldn't quite shake. I just can't believe Mom would intentionally harm us, he said, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. The conversation ended there, leaving tension in the air that neither of us dared to confront. That night, I lay awake, my mind swirling with a painful mixture of disbelief, anger, and betrayal. Martha, the woman who was supposed to be family, now felt like a stranger. The home that had once been a sanctuary suddenly felt like a battlefield. As the days passed, the weight of my suspicions deepened. Dan continued bringing more stories, more pieces of Martha's past that painted a picture of cruelty and manipulation. With each revelation, my heart grew heavier. How could I protect my family from someone who was supposed to be part of it? The evidence was mounting, yet with it came the realization that confronting the truth would unravel everything we knew. The day of reckoning came during what should have been a festive holiday gathering. The aroma of a holiday feast filled the room, a sharp contrast to the tension that gripped my heart. Family members chatted and laughed, oblivious to the storm about to break. I glanced at John, seeking some unspoken reassurance. He gave me a slight nod, his face a mixture of support and apprehension. Then Martha entered the room, her presence filling the space with a suffocating weight. She smiled, playing the part of the perfect hostess, but I saw through her facade. I cleared my throat, my voice trembling at first, but just loud enough to silence the room. I need to say something, I began, my heart racing but my words gaining strength. The room fell quiet, all eyes turning to me. For a while now, I've been noticing things, concerning things about Martha. Martha's smile wavered, her eyes narrowing as the tension thickened. What are you talking about, Sarah? She asked, her voice laced with irritation. I gathered evidence, I continued, pushing past my fear. Evidence of harmful manipulative behavior. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. John's aunt leaned toward her husband, whispering in disbelief. Martha's eyes narrowed further, her voice filled with feigned incredulity. This is absurd. What evidence could you possibly have? Expired food given to me and my baby, a near miss at the hospital, and stories from people who have known Martha for years, I listed, my resolve strengthening with each word. You're accusing me of trying to harm you? That's ridiculous. Martha's voice rose, panic edging beneath her attempt at control. The room erupted into chaos, family members talking over one another, some in shock, others in denial. Everyone, please. John's voice cut through the noise, steady and commanding. Let her finish. I explained everything, the hospital incident, the private investigator, the testimonies from Linda and Betty. As I spoke, the expressions around the room shifted from disbelief to horror, confusion twisting through each face. This is a family, not a courtroom, Martha snapped, her mask slipping as her voice wavered. You're tearing us apart with these baseless accusations. Baseless? I shot back, my patience fraying. The evidence speaks for itself. John stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. I've seen the evidence, he said, his voice tight with conflict. It's hard to ignore. You believe her over your own mother. Martha's voice cracked, a mixture of desperation and fury. John hesitated, his loyalty torn between his wife and his mother. I don't know what to believe, he admitted quietly, but we can't just ignore what Sarah has found. The family splintered then, some standing by Martha out of loyalty, others unsure, caught between disbelief and suspicion. The living room, once filled with holiday warmth, had turned into a battlefield of words and emotions. I've always welcomed you into this family, Sarah. How could you do this to us? Martha's eyes glistened with tears, but her words rang hollow. I did this to protect my family, I said firmly, to protect us from lies and manipulation. As the night wore on, the arguments faded into exhausted murmurs, the holiday gathering dissolving into fractured bonds. What should have been a night of celebration had become a scene of division and disbelief. John and I sat quietly in the aftermath, the weight of what had transpired settling around us like a heavy blanket. Sarah, I'm sorry, John murmured, his eyes filled with sorrow. I never wanted it to come to this. We did what we had to do, John. For our son. For our family, I replied, though my heart ached for the rift that had been created that night. As I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. I had confronted the truth, but at what cost? My heart was heavy, not just with the burden of what I had revealed, but with the uncertainty of what lay ahead for us as a family, torn apart by secrets and lies. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows of our new home, a symbol of the fresh start John and I had dared to embark upon. Our little boy played on the floor, his laughter a balm to the wounds of the past months. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the long, painful journey that had brought us here. Mommy, look. Our son held up a drawing, an innocent, crude depiction of our family. It was simple, but it represented everything we had fought to protect. That's beautiful, sweetie. Let's put it on the fridge, I said, my heart swelling with love. John walked in, a smile spreading across his face as he watched our son. How are you feeling today? Hopeful, I replied, feeling a sense of relief. I think we made the right decision moving here. I know we did, John agreed, wrapping an arm around me. It's a new beginning for us, away from all the negativity. The move was more than just a change of scenery, it was a step toward healing. I had started volunteering at a local support group, sharing my story and helping others who faced similar struggles with toxic family members. Later that week, during one of the meetings, I spoke to a group of women, each battling their own demons. Finding the courage to stand up against a toxic family member is never easy, I told them, my voice steady and strong. But remember, you're not alone. Afterward, a woman named Emily approached me. Your story, it's so similar to mine. How did you find the strength? It wasn't easy, I admitted. It took everything I had. But when I looked at my son, I knew I had to fight for a better future for us. I hoped my words gave her the comfort she needed. Back at home, John and I often talked about Martha and the fallout from the confrontation. News had reached us that she was facing social ostracism as more truths about her behavior came to light. Do you think she'll ever change? John asked one evening, his voice tinged with sadness. I don't know, John, I said gently, but we can't let the hope of what she could be overshadow what we know now. We need to focus on our family and move forward. Our decision to distance ourselves from Martha stood firm. It wasn't out of spite, but out of a need to protect our peace and safety. Months passed, and our new life began to take root. We made new friends, our son thrived in his new environment, and I found fulfillment in my advocacy work. One day, as I played with our son in the backyard, John came out with 2 cups of tea. Here's to new beginnings, he said, handing me a cup. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my cup against his. And to finding peace. As I watched our son chase butterflies, I realized that this quiet joy was what victory looked like. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the small, peaceful moments. It was in the strength we found in overcoming adversity. Our story didn't end with grand gestures or explosive confrontations. It ended with us, a family, building a life filled with love, respect, and boundaries. We had faced our trials and in doing so, emerged stronger and more united. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had weathered the storm, and now we were basking in the calm that followed. Our journey had brought us to a place of healing and hope. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, we were ready to face it together. The story of Sarah's struggle and triumph over her toxic mother-in-law has come to an end. How would you have handled the situation if you were in Sarah's shoes? Would you have made the same decisions or taken a different path? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more compelling content. Your support and interaction mean the world to us.